My parents hated me until I became successful. Now they want my help. I said no. They say some parents don't deserve children. I learned that truth earlier than most. I was born into a family that didn't want me. Not in the poetic, my parents were strict kind of way. I mean, they really didn't want me. My mother was 41 when she had mean accident, as she liked to call me. She'd tell me that to my face. I was done raising kids. And then you happened. She said it like she got a flat tire. My father wasn't any better. He was quieter about it, but his indifference was a constant. He'd read his newspaper at the table, never looked up when I walked in, never asked how school was, never said he loved me. When I was 6, I made him a birthday card out of printer paper and crayons. He didn't even open it. They already had 2 sons, me older brothers, Ryan and Chase. They were everything I wasn't. Athletic, popular, loud. My parents adored them. Every wall in our house had their sports trophies, their smiling class photos. Mine were shoved in drawers, if anywhere. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't loud. I liked books. I liked being alone. I used to think if I was smarter, better, quieter, something like me. I tried everything. I joined the math club, brought home straight A's. I cleaned the house without being asked. I made dinner once. They didn't say thank you. My mom just criticized how I'd overcooked the pasta. It took me years to stop trying. By the time I was 14, I kept to myself. I studied, I read, I planned. Not because I thought it would win me their approval anymore, but because I knew it was my only way out. They never came to my school events, never helped with college applications. When I got accepted into NAU on a full scholarship, my mom actually sighed. Well, at least we won't have to pay for it, she said. Like it was a burden she'd narrowly escaped. I packed my bags alone. No hugs, no good lucks. And when I stepped onto that train to New York City, I told myself I'd never look back. College was freedom. For the first time, I was around people who merely saw me. I made friends. I started a small art blog that, to my shock, actually got popular. I posted every day. Prints started selling. One of my illustrations went viral, and I got flooded with commissions. By my junior year, I was making more money than my part-time campus job. By graduation, I had an agent. Then came the contract with a publishing company, then the bestsellers list. I was 25 when I bought my first apartment in Manhattan, and not once did I call my parents. They never reached out either, not for birthdays, not for holidays. It was like we'd silently agreed to forget each other. Until 3 months ago. It started with a voicemail from an unknown number. Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I know it's been a while, but I was hoping we could talk. My heart dropped. I hadn't heard her voice in almost 6 years. Then another message from a different number. My dad. Just wondering if you'd be willing to catch up. We're in town next week. Next week? Town? I hadn't even told them where I lived. I ignored them both. Then came the email. It was long, rambling. My mom wrote it. She said they'd been following my career and were so proud of what I'd become. She wanted to rebuild our relationship. Said that I'd made mistakes, that things were different now. I didn't believe a word of it, but I did wonder. Why now? That answer came soon enough, because 2 weeks after that, my older brother Ryan emailed me. Hey sis, Mom and Dad are in a bit of a bind financially. Chase moved out. I moved out. Things are rough. They could really use your help. Just something to keep them afloat. And there it was. They wanted money, not love, not forgiveness, not even closure. Money die. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't sleep that night. All the old feelings came back like they'd been waiting just under the surface, ready to pull me down the second I let them. I knew what I should say, what a good person might say, but I wasn't going to be the good girl this time. I was going to tell them the truth. I started writing a response that night, not an email, a letter. Not because I planned to mail it, just because I needed to write it somewhere I could be honest without flinching. It began like this. Dear Mom and Dad, you only ever called me that when someone was watching. Otherwise I was her, or the girl. Sometimes just silence. So let me start with my name. My name is Emma. I'm your daughter. You've had 25 years to act like it. I kept writing. The words poured out of me like I was bleeding through a pen. You never loved me. You didn't even like me. You treated me like a mistake you had to live with. I remember every look, every cold shoulder, every time I sat quietly at the dinner table and you pretended I wasn't there. You showed up to every one of Ryan's football games, but not one of my recitals. You told me once that you didn't come to my middle school graduation because it wasn't a real thing. You watched me grow up alone in that house. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't wild. I was quiet. I was obedient. And you still found reasons to hate me. Do you even remember that I stopped talking for almost a year? Not because I couldn't, but because no one in that house ever listened anyway? I used to think something was wrong with me, that I had to earn your affection like it was a prize, but I know better now. I stopped there for a while, hands trembling over the keyboard. I could have ended the letter with that. But something in me needed to go further, to say what I'd never dared say before. You taught me how to survive. Not because you were good parents, but because I had to learn early that no one was coming to save me. I built everything I have out of the silence you left me in. And now, after years of pretending I didn't exist, you want me to come back into your life so I can save yours. No, I don't owe you anything. You had a daughter. You chose not to love her. You don't get to choose her success. I never sent it. But I read it every night that week. A few days later, I got a package. No return address. It was a box full of old family photos. Me as a baby. Me with my brothers. Me in birthday hats I didn't remember. There was one photo of my mom holding me, smiling like the world had just started. A sticky note was attached. I didn't know how to be a mother. I'm sorry, Mom. I stared at that photo for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything. Because whatever she was trying to say now, it wasn't for me, it was for her. She wanted to feel forgiven. She wanted a fresh start. But some messes stay messy. Some stories don't get rewritten. I put the box in my closet and tried not to look at it again. A week later, Ryan called me. That part surprised me. He never called. We hadn't spoken since I left for college. Emma, he said awkwardly. I just wanted to talk. About what? About them. I stayed silent. He sighed. Look, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. They weren't great to you. I saw it. I should have said something more back then. You didn't, I said flatly. I know, his voice cracked. I was a coward. I didn't disagree. They're in bad shape, Em. Dad lost his job. Mom's dealing with medical stuff. Insurance won't cover it. They're about to lose the house. I'm tapped out after Chase moved back in with his wife and left them hanging. I'm not their savior, I said. I know. But maybe you can be a human being. That stung more than I expected. I was a human being, I said quietly. They just never treated me like one. Ryan was quiet for a long time. I get it, he finally said. I really do. But if you ever decide to reach out, do it before there's no time left. He hung up, and I sat there, wondering what it meant that I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. That night, I went for a walk. It was cold. The kind of New York cold that crawls into your coat sleeves and makes your fingers stiff. But I liked it. It kept my thoughts sharp. I thought about the letter, the photos. Ryan's voice cracking. I thought about the first time I made money off my art, sitting in that shitty dorm room with a broken heater and a $19 lamp. No one told me congratulations. So I told myself. I thought about who I became without them, and I thought about what it would cost to open that door again, even a crack. Would they change? Or just take? Would I regret not trying? Or regret giving them another chance? And the hardest question of all, do I still want parents? Because needing them was something I'd buried a long time ago. I didn't sleep that night either. But I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up to another email. This one was from my mom. Emma, I don't know how to say this, but I don't have much time. I've been going through a lot of tests and treatments, and the doctors are starting to talk about a diagnosis I wasn't prepared for. Your dad, well, he hasn't been the same. I don't know what happened to us. Please, please let me make it right. I don't want to die with this guilt hanging over me. I know I hurt you, but I want to make amends. Please, let me try. We need you now more than ever. I sat there for a while, staring at the screen. Was this real? Was she really asking for help after everything? After all the years of bitterness and abandonment, now she needed me? I didn't know how to process this, but I also knew deep down that it wasn't about me. It was about her. About her fear of being alone. about the impending reality of her health, about wanting to escape the prison of guilt she'd built over the years. Part of me wanted to reach out. I could offer help, offer some relief. I could be the daughter she always wanted. I could fix it, make it better. Maybe, just maybe, I could feel like I had finally won her approval. But another part of me, the one that had been burned too many times, wanted to keep walking away. No matter how much I wanted the love I'd never had, I was terrified of being dragged back into the mess. The disappointment, the manipulation, the feeling that I was only ever wanted when I could provide something. I didn't reply. I couldn't. That evening, I went out for dinner with a friend, Nina, one of the few people I had let close to me since my move to the city. We'd met during an art show, and she was one of the first people to support my work without asking for anything in return. As we ate, Nina asked me about the latest project I was working on. But I could tell she could tell something was off. "What's wrong?" she asked, sipping her wine. "I don't know," I said, fidgeting with my napkin. "My parents, they want something from me." "From you?" She raised an eyebrow. "What are they asking for?" I hesitated. I didn't want to admit how badly it still hurt, how much it had shaken me to hear from them after all these years, but I couldn't hide it. "They're asking for money. They're in some financial trouble and they want me to help." Yikes. Nina winced. "That's a lot to deal with. After all this time, they expect you to just come running." "I don't know what they expect," I muttered, taking a sip of my water. "But they're not the parents I remember. They're trying to make it right, but it feels like they just want to use me, like they're pretending all these years of neglect didn't happen." Nina nodded. "I get that. I think if it were me, I'd want to help, but I wouldn't want to put myself in a position to be taken advantage of." I could feel my throat tightening. I wanted to talk more about it, but the emotions were overwhelming. It was easier to keep the walls up. I had spent so many years hiding behind them, I didn't know how to bring them down. "You don't have to decide right now," Nina said gently. "But don't forget about yourself in the process. You've worked hard to get where you are. You don't owe anyone anything, especially not them." I nodded, trying to smile, but the weight of the decision pressed down on me harder than I could express. The next few days were a blur. I kept replaying the messages, the photos, my mother's plea in my head. The guilt started eating at me in ways I couldn't shake. My phone was filled with unanswered messages, and each time I picked it up, I felt like I was suffocating. I went back to the apartment that evening, determined to do something, anything, to clear my mind. I thought maybe I would go for a run or start a new painting, but instead, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring at the photos of my parents in a box, in the corner of the room. They weren't the same people I remembered. I saw their faces from a different perspective now. My mother, looking so young and happy in the photos, reminded me of the woman I wished she had been. My father, holding me in his arms when I was just a baby, looked like a man who had once cared. But I couldn't look at them without feeling the ache of years of rejection, of waiting for something that never came. For a long time, I thought if I tried hard enough, I could convince myself to care about them, to forgive them. But the truth was, I didn't owe them that. I didn't owe them anything. I had spent my whole life fighting to stand on my own. I couldn't let them pull me back into their web of guilt and manipulation. The decision was clear now. The following morning, I opened the email from my mom one last time, reading her plea over and over. Then I clicked delete. It felt like a weight lifting from my chest. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for me. I couldn't save them. I had spent too many years trying to save myself. I had made my peace with who they were. I didn't need them to validate my worth anymore. I didn't need their approval, and I didn't need to give them anything. They were not my responsibility. They never had been. Later that day, I called Ryan. "I'm not helping them," I said simply. There was silence on the other end. "You don't have to. I get it," Ryan finally said, "but I hope you don't regret it." "I won't," I said firmly. "I've lived my life without them, and I'm okay." We didn't talk much after that. The conversation ended quickly, and I felt a sense of finality. I had made the right choice. It was time to move forward, without looking back. I didn't hear from my parents again after that. The silence was deafening. but it wasn't a silence filled with regret. It was the kind of silence that told me I had let go of something that wasn't mine to carry. I was free, and I was finally at peace with it. Months passed since I made the decision to walk away from my parents. The weight of their expectations was no longer suffocating me. I could breathe again. It was strange how much lighter my life felt without their presence, without the constant burden of wondering if I was doing enough to prove myself to them. I focused on my art, on the life I had built in the city. The gallery shows were going better than I had expected, and I had started to establish a name for myself in the local art community. More than that, I felt more like myself. The walls that I had built around my heart had started to come down, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was worthy of love, of success, of peace. But there was still a part of me, no matter how hard I tried to bury it, that couldn't shake the sense of loss. Not of my parents, not of their approval, but of the relationship that could have been, of the family I had never had. I couldn't deny that it left a scar, a wound I had been too afraid to confront until now. One evening, I got a call. I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something inside me urged me to pick up. "Hello? Emma, it's me, your father." I froze. His voice was older, weaker, tinged with something I hadn't heard before: guilt, fear. It made me sick to my stomach, but I forced myself to listen. "Dad?" I said, barely above a whisper. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me," he began, his voice shaky, "but I need you to listen. We're in trouble. Your mom, she's sick. Really sick. I don't know what to do. I don't know who else to turn to." I felt a cold lump form in my throat. I hadn't heard from them in months. The silence had been absolute. And now, here he was, calling me out of nowhere, asking for help. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, the bitterness creeping into my voice despite myself. "You never cared before. Why should I care now?" His voice cracked. "Emma, I know I've failed you. I know I've hurt you. But I'm asking for help. Your mother, she's dying, and we're broke. Please, we need you." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Was this really happening? Was this a manipulation? Or is this the truth? My father, the man who had never been there, was asking me for help. After all the years of neglect, of pain, of being told I wasn't enough. Part of me wanted to scream, to hang up and walk away, as I had before. But there was another part, buried deep inside, that ached. The part of me that wanted so badly to be loved, to fix the brokenness. "Dad, I started, but my words trailed off. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, his voice softer now. "I don't expect anything from you. I didn't know who else to turn to. I know I'm asking a lot, but please, can you help us? Can you help her?" The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that I had nothing left to give, that he had forfeited his right to ask me for anything. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down I knew that if I didn't help, I would never forgive myself. That guilt, the one I thought I had buried, would eat me alive. "I'll help," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. The next few days were a blur of doctor's appointments, hospital visits, and late-night phone calls. My mother had been diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. There was nothing they could do. The treatment was a long shot, and the doctors weren't optimistic. My father, who had never been good with emotions, was a shell of himself. I saw in him what I had never seen before: a man broken. A man who realized too late the mistakes he had made. The house I grew up in felt different. It felt empty. The walls that had once been filled with anger and resentment now seemed hollow, haunted. I didn't know what to say to him, to either of them. It wasn't just the money they needed. It was the emotional support, the connection that had been missing all these years. I tried. I really did. I spent hours at the hospital with my mom, sitting silently by her bedside. She wasn't the woman I had once hoped for, the woman who could wrap me in love. She was frail now, weak and sick. But there were moments when I would catch her looking at me with a vulnerability I had never seen in her before. She would reach out her thin, trembling hand, and for the briefest of seconds, it felt like the years of silence and pain were nothing, as if we could start over. But I knew better. I knew it wasn't that simple. I couldn't just forget. A week passed, and the hospital visits became routine. I'd show up, sit quietly, and leave. My dad was always there too, but he never said much. We existed in the same space, but we were miles apart. He was still the man who had abandoned me, who had put everything else before me. And I was still the daughter who had been left behind. Then, one day, as I was leaving the hospital, I ran into him. My father. "Emma!" He started, but he didn't know what to say. I stood there, arms crossed, waiting for him to finish the sentence that I had wanted to hear for so long. "I'm sorry." But it never came. Not in those words, at least. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make it right." "I don't think you can," I replied softly. "It's not about fixing it anymore. It's about accepting what happened, what we are now." He looked at me, his eyes full of regret, of something else, something I hadn't seen in years. But I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel angry either. I just felt tired. "I don't want to hate you, Dad," I said quietly. "I don't want to carry that with me anymore. But I can't erase the past. I can't forget." He nodded slowly as if he understood. And maybe he did. Maybe he had finally understood what I had been trying to tell him all these years. "Thank you for helping us," he said softly. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked away. That night, I went home. And for the first time in years, I slept without the weight of anger pressing on my chest. I had made my peace in my own way. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was mine. The next morning, I received another email from my mother. This time, there were no demands, no guilt trips. Just a simple message. "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry. I wish I had done better by you." I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I could forgive them. But I realized something. I didn't need to forgive them to move on. I didn't need to carry their guilt, their mistakes, their brokenness anymore. I had my own life to live now, and I was going to live it on my own terms. Weeks passed, and the visits to the hospital became less frequent. My mother, despite the grim prognosis, seemed to hold on. There was something about her, something stubborn, that kept her alive, as something I hadn't noticed when I was younger. Perhaps it was in her own way. She loved me. Maybe she always had, but she just didn't know how to show it. And maybe I had spent too many years resenting her for that, for something I didn't fully understand. I couldn't fix the past, but there was something comforting about knowing that, in her final days, she had at least tried to make amends. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself spending more time at the gallery. Art had always been my escape, but now it was more than that. It was my therapy. I needed something to ground me, something to hold on to in the chaos of my life. And it felt like my art was the only thing I could control. But there were moments when the weight of everything, my broken family, the guilt I still felt, the trauma from years of neglect would creep up on me. And in those moments, I would pick up my brush and let it all pour out onto the canvas. One day, after a particularly difficult visit to the hospital, I found myself standing in front of a blank canvas, unsure of what to paint. The silence in the room was oppressive. The air felt thick with memories, with all the things I never said, with all the things I never had the chance to say. I dipped the brush into the paint and began to move it across the canvas. The strokes were hesitant at first, then more confident, as the colors began to take shape. By the end of the day, I had created something raw, something that felt like the culmination of everything I had been holding in. The piece was chaotic, filled with sharp contrasts and fragmented images. But at the center of it all was a single figure, standing tall and proud despite the storm swirling around them. It was me. The days passed slowly after that. My mother's condition worsened, but there was still no sign of her passing. My father, who had always been distant and emotionally unavailable, seemed to have changed, too. It wasn't dramatic, but there was a quiet shift in his behavior. He was more attentive to my mother, more present in the moments he spent with her. There was one particular evening when I was sitting at the kitchen table, going over some sketches for a new art piece, when he came into the room. "Emma," he said softly, his voice still carrying the weight of a man who had spent years avoiding confrontation. "Can we talk?" I set my pencil down and looked at him. There were bags under his eyes, and his face was lined with years of regret. "About what?" I asked, my tone guarded. He cleared his throat and took a step closer. I want to apologize. For everything. For how I treated you. For how I treated your mother. For how I treated myself. I was selfish, and I know that. I didn't know what to say. The apology? The words I had wanted to hear for so long felt like they were coming too late. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him that this didn't fix anything, that it was too little, too late. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded. "I know," I said softly. "It's hard to just forgive, but I appreciate you saying it." He looked down, then back up at me. "I don't expect anything from you. I don't think I ever really did. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. And if you ever need me, I'll be here." I stood up, feeling the weight of his words press against my chest. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive him. But in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something that had to happen all at once. Maybe it would come in pieces. Maybe it would never come at all. But the fact that he had said it, that he had acknowledged the pain he had caused, meant more than I was willing to admit. "I'll remember that," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you." The next week, I received a call in the middle of the night. It was my father. "She's gone," he said, his voice cracking. "Your mother, she passed away." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The words didn't hit me the way I expected. I thought I would be devastated, overcome with grief, but instead I felt a strange calm. I had prepared myself for this moment, for the inevitable end. "I'll be there," I said. "I'll help with the arrangements." The funeral was small, just family and a few friends. The whole event felt surreal to me. It was as if the years of pain and silence had led to this one moment of finality. My mother was gone, and with her, so much of the unresolved anger I had held on to. As I stood by her grave, staring down at the small mound of earth that covered her, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had let go of so much, and it wasn't just because of her death, it was because I'd finally given myself permission to stop carrying the weight of the past. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation. I had built my own life, one that was mine and mine alone, and that was enough. The weeks following my mother's death were a blur of arrangements and paperwork. But through it all, I held on to the peace I had found. It wasn't a perfect peace, but it was mine. My father, still grieving, leaned on me for support. I did what I could, but I also made sure that I didn't lose myself in the process. I was still Emma. The gallery shows continued, and my art continued to evolve. I had found a voice in the chaos of my life, a way to channel everything I had experienced into something beautiful. And that, more than anything else, was my triumph. One day, a few months later, I found myself standing in front of the piece I had created during that difficult night, one where I painted myself standing tall amidst the storm. I hadn't realized it at the time, but it was a metaphor for everything I had gone through, for everything I had survived. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of pride that I had never allowed myself to feel before. I had done it. I had made it. And in the end, that was all I needed to know. The gallery was bustling as I walked through the doors, the soft hum of chatter filling the air. People were admiring the new pieces, discussing their interpretations, and even debating what they saw in the chaotic strokes and colors that I had poured onto the canvas. It was a strange but gratifying feeling knowing that my work had touched others in ways I hadn't even anticipated. For years I had hidden behind my art, using it as a shield from the world. Now, it was my voice, my story, and it was finally being heard. But amidst the excitement of the night, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Ethan. The same Ethan who had walked away from me years ago when everything with my family was falling apart. The same man who had been there when I needed him the most, only to turn his back when I thought I had finally found something worth holding on to. I couldn't believe it. I thought I had moved past the bitterness, past the pain of that betrayal. But there he was, standing in front of one of my paintings, looking lost in thought. For a moment, I considered walking away, letting the past stay where it belonged. But instead, my feet carried me toward him, and before I knew it, I was standing beside him. He turned slowly, his eyes widening when he saw me. His expression was a mix of surprise and regret. "Emma," he said softly, as if unsure whether or not he had the right to speak my name after everything that had happened. "Ethan," I replied, my voice calm but guarded. "I didn't expect to see you here." I didn't know you were having a show," he said, his gaze flickering between me and the painting in front of us. It's amazing. You've really grown, Emma. You've come so far." I nodded, not sure what to say. There was a part of me that wanted to ask him why he had left, why he hadn't fought for us when everything had fallen apart. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted the answers. Some questions were better left unasked, and some wounds were better left unopened. "Thanks," I said, keeping my response brief. "I appreciate that." There was a long pause, the awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, Ethan broke it, his voice hesitant. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately," he admitted, his eyes not meeting mine. "About what happened. About how I treated you. I was selfish, and I know I hurt you. I'm sorry, Emma. I should have never walked away." His words hit me, but not in the way I expected. There was no wave of anger, no rush of emotions demanding to be let out. Instead, I felt a quiet calm, a calm that had taken me years to find. "I know you were," I said, my voice steady, "and I know I wasn't perfect either. But I don't think we were right for each other back then. Not the way we should have been." He nodded slowly, his expression solemn. "I get that. I wanted you to know that I regret it. Everything." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle in my chest. It was what I had always wanted to hear, but now that I had heard it, I realized it no longer mattered. What mattered was who I was now, what I'd become without him. "I appreciate your apology, Ethan," I said quietly. "But I've moved on. I'm not the same person I was when we were together, and I don't think we can go back to what we had." He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to find the words that would somehow undo the years of pain and regret. But there was no magic phrase, no solution to the mess we had made of each other's lives. The past was too tangled, too far gone. "I understand," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And I'll always care about you, Emma, no matter what." I smiled faintly, my heart strangely light despite the heaviness of the conversation. "I know, and I'll always remember the good times. But we can't keep holding on to something that's already passed." For a moment, we stood there in silence, two people who had once shared everything, now standing at the edges of each other's lives, separated by time, distance, and the choices we had made. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said softly, before turning away. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Seeing Ethan again had stirred up feelings I thought I had buried deep inside me. But in the end, I realized that those feelings were just remnants of a past I had already let go of. I wasn't the same person I had been when I was with him. I had grown, I had healed, and most importantly, I had learned to let go. There were still days when the weight of it all felt like too much to carry. But I had learned something important through it all. Healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about accepting. It was about finding peace within yourself, even in the face of everything that had tried to break you. I had found that peace. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the final piece I had created for the gallery show. It was a portrait of myself, standing alone in the center of a storm. The storm represented the chaos of my past, the pain, the hurt, the rejection, and the grief. But in the center of it all, I was standing tall. My expression was calm, determined. I had survived, and that was the message I wanted to send to the world. I picked up my phone and texted my father. He hadn't reached out since the funeral, and though I had promised myself I wouldn't be the one to make the first move, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward together. "Dad," I typed, my fingers hesitating over the keys. "I think we should talk." About everything. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The message lingered on the screen for a moment before disappearing into the ether. It felt strange opening that door again. But I was ready to see if there was something left to salvage, something worth saving in the wreckage of the past. And so, I waited. For him. For me. For whatever came next. Days passed after I sent the text. It felt strange, as though I had opened a door that I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. My mind kept circling back to the same question. What was I hoping for? A reconciliation? An apology? Or was it just a moment of weakness? A desire to reach out to the people who had hurt me the most, simply because they were my parents. I had spent so many years trying to convince myself that I didn't need them, that I could stand on my own without their approval or love. But deep down, there was always a part of me that wondered, if only they knew how far I'd come. If only they understood the woman I had become. Would things be different? The phone buzzed in my hand, breaking me from my thoughts. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My heart skipped a beat as I unlocked my screen, hesitating before opening the message. It was from my father. Emma, I think we need to talk. Can we meet? It's important. The words were simple, but they hit me like a wave. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of how to respond. For so long, I had been the one to bury the past, the one to walk away. Now, my father was asking for a chance to speak, to address everything that had been left unspoken for years. I took a deep breath and typed back, my response measured but calm. I'm willing to meet, but I need you to understand that this isn't going to be easy. I hit send and immediately felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. There was no turning back now. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I had expected. I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe, my hands trembling slightly as I waited. I hadn't seen my father in years. He had grown older, his hair grayer, his posture more hunched. But despite the physical changes, he still looked the same. There was something about his presence that felt familiar, like a memory I had long since buried. When he walked in, I didn't immediately recognize him. The years had worn him down in ways that I hadn't anticipated. But as he approached the table, his eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it, the same man who had abandoned me, the same man who had once been my hero. But now, he was just a broken man, seeking something that I wasn't sure I could give. Emma, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You look amazing. Thanks, I replied, my voice cool. I've been doing okay. We both sat down, the silence between us stretching out for what felt like an eternity. I wasn't sure how to begin, how to address everything that had been left unsaid for so long. Finally, my father broke the silence. I know I've hurt you, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I know I failed you in every way possible, and for that, I am truly sorry. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head, but hearing him say it out loud, hearing the pain in his voice, made me realize something wasn't the only one who had suffered. My father had lost something too. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to admit it. I've spent so many years thinking about what I did, he continued, his eyes meeting mine. I never should have treated you the way I did. I never should have pushed you away. You were always my daughter, and I should have protected you, not driven you into the ground. I didn't know what to say. The words that had been so carefully constructed in my mind seemed to slip away in the face of his vulnerability. Instead, I just nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that had been said. You're right, I said softly. You should have been there, but you weren't, and it hurt. It still hurts. My father reached across the table, his hand trembling as he placed it over mine. I know I can't change the past, Emma. But I want to try. I want to be there for you now if you'll let me. I pulled my hand away, not out of anger, but out of a deep, profound sense of caution. I had spent years building my life without him. I had fought so hard to find my own path, to heal the wounds he had inflicted on me. I wasn't sure I could simply let him back in, even if I wanted to. I'm not sure that's possible, I said quietly. I've spent so long learning to live without you, to find my own way. I can't just erase all of that. My father's face fell, the hope in his eyes dimming for a moment. "I understand," he said softly. "I know it's not going to be easy. But I'm asking for a chance to make things right." I sat there in silence, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to forgive him, wanted to believe that things could be different. But another part of me was afraid that if I opened the door too wide, I would be hurt again. That the same person who had let me down before would do it once more. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spoke. "I don't know if I can give you that chance, Dad, but I'll think about it. That's all I can promise." He nodded, his expression resigned but not defeated. "That's all I ask for." The meeting ended without any dramatic resolution, without the catharsis I had imagined for years. But as I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange sense of relief. The conversation was only the beginning, but it had opened something inside me. Maybe I wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but I was ready to try, and that was something. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection. I saw a woman who had fought against the odds, a woman who had built herself from the ground up. And now, for the first time in years, I was standing on the brink of something new. Maybe it wasn't about closing the door on my past, but about finding peace within it. Maybe, just maybe, I could let go of the bitterness and embrace the possibility of healing. But for now, I was okay. I had come so far, and no matter what happened next, I knew I was strong enough to face it. A week passed, and with it, the weight of the meeting lingered in the back of my mind. Every time I picked up my phone or thought about my parents, the same questions swirled around in my head. Was I being too harsh? Did I deserve to hold on to the pain? Was there room in my life for forgiveness? I had spent so many years convincing myself that I didn't need Tom, that I was better off on my own. And for the most part, I had been. I had built a life, a career, and relationships that mattered. But even with all of that, a small part of me still longed for the connection I had never had. The connection that was supposed to be there, but never was. I hadn't responded to my father's message, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure if I was ready to let him back in. The woman I had become had spent so much time fighting for her independence that the idea of returning to the past felt like a threat to everything I had built. But then, another message came. It wasn't from my father, but from my mother. "Emma, I'm sorry for everything. I know I can't change what happened, but I would really like to talk. We've both been through so much, and I'm afraid we've lost something that can never be replaced." It felt different from my father's message. There was no plea for forgiveness, no request for a second chance. Just a quiet, heartbreaking acknowledgement of the years lost. I sat there, staring at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The words I wanted to say felt stuck in my throat. I had spent years pretending I didn't care. But now, the truth hit me like a tidal wave. I did care. I cared more than I was willing to admit. I responded, my fingers shaking as I typed, "I'm willing to meet, but I can't promise anything." It wasn't a promise of forgiveness. It wasn't a declaration that everything would be okay. But it was a step forward, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my own healing. The meeting with my mother was different from the one with my father. It wasn't that she was less sincere, it was just that the dynamic between us was different. My mother had always been more distant, more removed, but there was something in her eyes now, something I hadn't seen before. Regret, guilt, but also a kind of quiet strength. When I walked into the small cafe where we agreed to meet, she was already sitting at a table by the window. She looked up as I entered, and for a moment I saw the woman who had raised me, the woman who had given birth to me, and yet had never really been there for me. "Emma," she said softly, standing up to greet me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I nodded, taking a seat across from her. The silence that followed wasn't as heavy as the one with my father, but it was still there, hanging between us. Finally, she spoke again. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Emma. I don't even expect you to want a relationship with me. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I was wrong. I let my own fears, my own mistakes, take priority over you. And I can never take that back." There was something in her voice, a sincerity I hadn't heard in years. And for the first time, I believed it. Not because she asked for forgiveness, but because she was finally acknowledging the pain she had caused. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice steady but soft. "But I can try to understand why you did what you did. I can try to let go of the anger." My mother nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. "That's all I can ask for. And even if we can't go back to what we were, I hope we can find a way to move forward. Even if it's just one step at a time." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing something by giving her a chance. I felt like I was gaining something I had been searching for my entire life: peace. As the weeks went by, I took the steps I needed to heal. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt. Moments when I wanted to pull away and close the door for good. But each time, I reminded myself of something important. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for me. And as I began to open my heart to the possibility of healing, I found that it didn't mean I had to erase the past. It didn't mean I had to forget the hurt, the abandonment, or the years lost. But it did mean that I could finally let go of the weight that had been dragging me down for so long. Months passed, and though things between me and my parents weren't perfect, they had changed. I wouldn't say that we had rebuilt everything we had lost, but we had started to rebuild something, a foundation of understanding, and, dare I say, trust. There were still moments of tension, times when old habits resurfaced, but they were fewer and farther between. I had come to accept that healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, it was uncomfortable, but it was worth it. I continued with my life, my career, and my relationships. I didn't need my parents to validate me, but I no longer felt the need to shut them out completely. I had learned the hard way that holding on to bitterness only hurt me in the end. And for the first time, I felt free. If you like this video, please subscribe for more.